When I imagined life in the suburbs, I pictured something straight out of a real estate ad. You know, kids riding bikes, BBQs with suspiciously perfect grill marks, neighbors waving like malfunctioning animatronics from Disneyland. Instead, I got Karen. And not just any Karen. No, sir. I got the final boss of Karens. It started the moment I set foot on my new driveway. The sun was shining. The birds were chirping. The air smelled faintly of freshly cut grass and mild regret. I had just unloaded the last box from my car, wiped the sweat off my forehead, and took a deep, victorious breath of my new, peaceful life. And that's when it happened. At first, I thought it was a hallucination brought on by dehydration. There, standing dead center of my lawn, like she had been conjured by my worst subconscious fears, was a woman. Polo shirt, pressed khakis, aggressively white sneakers, and the holy relic itself, the clipboard, clutched against her chest like it contained the very laws of the universe. She didn't walk up. She materialized, like some vengeful suburban ghost summoned by the disturbance of boxes placed at imperfect angles. For a second, we just stared at each other. Me, dripping sweat and clutching a lamp. Her, silent and seething with more judgment than a Baptist church lady's luncheon. "Hello," she finally said, voice sharp enough to shave with. "I'm Karen, president of the Homeowners Association." She thrust the clipboard at me with the kind of urgency you usually reserve for handing over a live grenade. Attached to it was a thick, laminated document labeled Community Code of Conduct, updated 14.2.3.1b. It looked like a bedtime story written by the lawyers of Satan himself. Still stunned, I accepted the gift. And just when I thought the madness might end, she wrinkled her nose so hard I thought she might accidentally suck it back into her face. "Your boxes are uneven," she said. I blinked. Twice. Surely, she wasn't serious? "I'll, keep that in mind," I muttered, glancing at my war crime level offense, some cardboard boxes resting a little crooked on the driveway. She nodded stiffly, the way royalty might acknowledge the existence of a particularly disgusting peasant, turned on her spotless heel, and marched off without another word. I stood there, lamp still in hand, wondering if I had just met the physical embodiment of a Yelp review. Now, I'm generally a pretty optimistic guy. I've survived IKEA furniture, cable company customer service, and once even Thanksgiving at my in-laws. I figured maybe she was just having a bad day. Maybe she had run out of non-fat oat milk, or her favorite Pilates class was full. Spoiler, she was always having a bad day. And unfortunately, she planned on making it my problem. Within 48 hours of moving in, I got my first official notice of violation. Typed in Comic Sans, no less. Because when you're delivering tyranny, it's important to be whimsical. My crime. Mailbox 0.3 inches too tall. Yeah, apparently, my perfectly functional, totally innocent mailbox was a threat to the delicate balance of suburban civilization. Then came the second notice. Lawn height, 2.75 inches. Regulation required exactly 2.5. I half expected the next letter to ding me for the unauthorized chirping volume of local sparrows. I wasn't just living next to Karen. I was now living inside her dystopian fever dream. Naturally, I appealed every single violation. Politely, professionally, and with the kind of passive-aggressive legalese that would make a corporate lawyer weep tears of pride. Every email I sent, every official response I drafted, felt like a tiny slap across Karen's clipboard-wielding hand. It was beautiful. Neighbors began to notice. At first, they watched me like I was a condemned man on death row. But slowly, so slowly, you could sense something changing. Curtains twitched. Garage doors opened just a crack. Whispers floated through hedges. Someone, finally, was standing up to the Queen of Covenants. But Karen wasn't the type to lose graciously. Oh no. Karen was the type who read Sun Tzu's Art of War and thought, not aggressive enough. She would find another way to correct me. She just needed time. And oh, did she find it. One warm Saturday, while I was trying to enjoy my minor victory by planting a few geraniums, the air shifted. You know that feeling right before a storm? Yeah, like that. I looked up, and there she was. Clipboard clutched tight. Smile so smug it probably needed its own zip code. I conducted an inspection, she announced. Oh good. She had promoted herself to Inspector General now. I noticed several small cracks in your paint. Also, the color has noticeably faded under the sun. That's a violation of the community appearance standards. She said it like she had just caught me running a black market casino out of my basement. You'll need to repaint the house, she continued, puffing up with the unearned pride of a mall cop who just found a teenager loitering. Of course, I said, smiling sweetly, already planning my revenge in my mind. I wouldn't want to disturb the ecosystem. Her eyes narrowed suspiciously, but she didn't sense the trap yet. After Karen's grand proclamation that my house was now an eyesore of the community, I did what any reasonable person would do. I started preparing revenge, but not the messy, impulsive kind. No, I wanted something elegant, something surgical, something that would haunt her every time she so much as glanced out her plantation shutters. The first step is to collect evidence and provide an alibi. I fired off the politest, most nauseatingly respectful email I could compose. Dear Ms. Karen, thank you kindly for your recent inspection and bringing the matter of my home's exterior condition to my attention. In order to comply fully with HOA standards, could you please confirm the precise color code I should use when repainting? Wishing you a wonderful day. Your humble and compliant neighbor. It was the email equivalent of putting a pretty bow on a stick of dynamite. She replied within 20 minutes. I imagine she cleared her calendar just to hit reply with righteous fury. Approved color is colonial white, per the HOA appearance standards, Section 4, Subsection 2b. Please ensure strict adherence to the guidelines provided. I printed the email. I laminated it. I considered getting it tattooed on my forearm. Evidence, my friends. Evidence is everything when dealing with the clipboard cartel. Now that I had her official word, it was time for step 2, implementation. The next morning, I rolled up in front of my house with a truck full of supplies. Buckets of colonial white paint. Thank you, Karen, for the free color consultation, brushes, rollers, tarps, everything needed for a community-approved miracle makeover. Neighbors peeked from behind their curtains, their faces a mix of horror and pity. You could almost hear the collective sigh. Poor guy, they must have thought. Another soul broken by the system. Another dream crushed under the sensible orthopedic sneaker of Karen. And honestly, I let them think it. Karen herself showed up around noon, doing her usual stealth patrol. She pretended she was just out for a walk, but we all knew she was circling like a vulture in a tracksuit. She didn't even try to hide the smug little smirk tugging at her lips when she saw me rolling on the first coat of paint. Victory oozed off her like cheap perfume. She even dared to shout, "Good to see you taking pride in the community," before sashaying away with the grace of a wounded hippo. Oh, Karen. Oh, sweet, delusional Karen. If only you knew. It took all day of hard work. The sun was relentless, my arms were noodles, and I was pretty sure I had inhaled enough paint fumes to see the future. But finally, at sunset, I stepped back and admired my masterpiece. At first glance, the house looked normal, perfectly normal. An HOA-approved, regulation-abiding, colonial white slice of suburbia. But beneath that innocent exterior, there was a secret weapon, a little something special mixed in with the paint. Something Karen would discover soon enough. As I packed up my supplies, one of the older neighbors, Mr. Henderson, shuffled by with his dog, a tiny thing that looked like a dust bunny with anger management issues. He shook his head sadly, glancing at my freshly painted house. "Shame," he muttered. "I thought you were different." I smiled, wiping my hands on a rag. "Don't worry, Mr. Henderson," I said, winking. "It's not over yet." He looked at me like I had finally snapped from exposure to HOA radiation, but I just kept smiling and walked inside. That night, the neighborhood slept soundly. Well, most of the neighborhood. About an hour later, the first scream broke the peace. It was loud. It was shrill. And it carried all the raw, hysterical disbelief of someone who had just realized their entire life was a lie. I opened my front door casually, like a man checking the weather, and there she was. Karen, standing in the middle of the street in her fuzzy slippers, arms flailing, face lit up by the eerie, otherworldly glow coming off my house. Because, you see, I had repainted the house with colonial white paint, sure, but I had mixed in high-grade, industrial-strength fluorescent pigment. By day, a normal, regulation-approved colonial white. By night, a radioactive ghost beacon. My house wasn't just visible. It was a lighthouse for confused bats and potentially passing aircraft. Karen's shrieks reached new levels of hysteria as more neighbors stumbled out onto their lawns, rubbing their eyes and staring at the suburban equivalent of an alien mothership. "What the hell is this?" she screamed, jabbing a trembling finger at my house. "What is this?" I strolled down my walkway, hands in pockets, trying my best to look confused. "This," I said, squinting up at my home, which was currently glowing like a rave in Ibiza. "This is my house." "I can see that," she screeched. "Why is it shining?" I shrugged, the picture of innocence. "I used the paint you approved, Karen," I said. "Colonial white, section 4, subsection 2B. Got your email right here if you want to double check." Her mouth opened and closed like a dying fish. "I may have added a little something for durability," I added with a casual wave. "UV protection, you know. It's good for the environment." Karen made a noise somewhere between a banshee and a tea kettle on the verge of explosion. The neighbors? They were loving it. Laughing, whispering, recording everything on their phones. For the first time in a long, long time, the balance of power had shifted. And Karen knew it. Karen stood there, her face twisting through every stage of grief in under 30 seconds. Denial, anger, bargaining, existential crisis. I half expected her to drop to her knees and start screaming at the stars like a villain in a bad soap opera. Meanwhile, the neighbors gathered like it was free popcorn night. Even Mr. Henderson wandered over, holding a cup of coffee, giving the house a long, slow nod, as if silently approving the divine chaos unraveling before him. Karen, still trembling with righteous fury, pointed her clipboard. Yes, she had actually brought it out at midnight like some suburban exorcism tool, and shrieked. This is a violation. I'll have you fined. Sanctioned. You'll regret this." I smiled sweetly, the way you do when a toddler threatens to beat you at chess. "Karen," I said, "everything was done according to your rules. Colonial white. Approved. Verified. I even have it notarized if you'd like to see." She opened her mouth, searching desperately for a loophole, some way to wriggle out of the bear trap she had waltzed into herself. But the glow. "Nothing in the regulations about luminescence," I said, shrugging. "Maybe an oversight? I'm sure you'll fix it in the next version of the Code of Conduct. I hear version 14.2.3.1. C is going to be a real page-turner." A muffled snort came from the crowd. Karen looked around and realized, with the horror of a deposed dictator, that the people weren't on her side anymore. The audience she used to command with an iron clipboard was now laughing at her. The next morning, the real fun began. Karen, true to form, filed an official complaint. Several, actually. Unauthorized modification of exterior appearance. Causing public nuisance through visual pollution. Creating a hazard for air traffic. No, I'm not kidding. She even tried to rope in the FAA, claiming my house was potentially disruptive to nighttime navigation systems. Apparently, Karen believed my glowing colonial cottage could down a 747. The HOA board, normally a rubber stamp for Karen's reign of terror, held an emergency meeting. I was invited, of course, not because they wanted my side of the story. Oh no, but because they legally had to. Picture it. Karen at the front of the room, armed with color swatches, aerial maps, laser pointers, and at least 3 binders labeled Exhibit A. And me, sitting in the back, sipping coffee from a mug that said live, laugh, litigate. When my turn came to speak, I stood up, calmly handed out copies of Karen's own approval email, color samples from the approved palette, and, just for fun, a copy of the community appearance standards. Page 42, highlighted. No restrictions concerning reflective or luminescent properties of exterior paint, provided base color matches approved palette. The room fell silent. One board member coughed awkwardly. Another suddenly found the ceiling extremely interesting. Karen looked like she might actually vibrate out of existence from sheer rage. I understand your frustration, Karen. I said in my best, I'm totally not enjoying this voice. But I simply followed the regulations to the letter. You know how important it is to follow the rules. Boom. Right between the eyes. She spluttered. She gasped. She appealed to some imaginary higher court of HOA law that existed only in her mind. But the truth was, I had built my trap too well. Karen was stuck. The board couldn't find me. They couldn't force me to repaint. They couldn't even make me dim the glow. All they could do was sit there, looking like they had just eaten a particularly sour lemon, while my house continued to light up the block like a suburban aurora borealis. As I walked out of the meeting, Karen hissed after me, "This isn't over." I turned back, gave her a smile that could fry an ant at 20 paces, and said, "Oh, I sincerely hope it isn't. Because, dear Karen, we were just getting started. The real revolution was about to begin, and it would be glorious." You could practically feel the tension ripple through the neighborhood the morning after the emergency HOA meeting. It wasn't just about my glowing house anymore. No, something had shifted. Neighbors who had lived for years under Karen's clipboard dictatorship now smelled blood in the water. And if there's one thing suburban dads love more than competitive lawn care, it's petty revenge. It started with Mr. Henderson. Old, slow-moving Mr. Henderson, who had once been fined 3 separate times for the crime of excessive front porch decor, red, a small seasonal wreath, and 2 pumpkins. The day after the meeting, I saw him outside with a paint bucket. By evening, his house, previously a mild beige, now gleamed in the dark like a glowing orange creamsicle. It was beautiful. It was majestic. And it was technically still within the approved color palette. Then came the Thompsons 2 houses down. Their house, always pristine, now pulsed faintly in the night with a soothing, radioactive teal. I heard whispers that Mrs. Thompson called it their tropical getaway glow. One by one, the neighborhood houses transformed. Soft blues that glowed like forgotten swimming pools. Muted greens that radiated an eerie, alien warmth. Even the strictly regulation, dusty rose homes began to emit a faint pinkish halo once the sun went down. By the end of the week, the entire street looked like a Vegas light show designed by a colorblind unicorn. Karen was, in a word, apoplectic. She stormed up and down the sidewalks daily, clipboard clutched so tightly I half expected it to snap in half. She barked at anyone who would listen. Spoiler, no one was listening anymore, threatening new rules, new inspections, mass evictions. It was like watching a fish flop around after someone drained the pond. The best part? Every single homeowner had documented proof that they were in technical compliance. Color matched? Check. Code approved? Check. Extra durability additives for longevity under UV light? Well, no one said you couldn't enhance your paint job. Karen had been out Karened, and she couldn't do a thing about it. In true tyrant fashion, when control slipped from her fingers, she pivoted straight into denial. She started sending out desperate newsletters full of things like lighting regulations coming soon, new inspections scheduled for all homes. Reminder, respect your community's traditional aesthetic values. I'm pretty sure traditional aesthetic values was code for stop making your houses look like Skittles exploded. But it was too late. The dam had broken. The peasants had stormed the castle. And the queen of clipboards was now just a very angry woman screaming into the void. The final straw came 2 weeks later. Karen held a special emergency town hall meeting at the community center. The flyers promised urgent reforms to save our neighborhood. Attendance was mandatory. Well, as mandatory as anything can be when you have 0 legal authority left. I went, of course. Front row, popcorn in hand. Karen took the stage, looking more frazzled than I'd ever seen her. Her hair was a little less perfectly coiffed. Her shoes, gasp, were scuffed. She launched into a 30-minute tirade about how our neighborhood was becoming a blight, an embarrassment, a cautionary tale for future generations. She waved around statistics, graphs, even some blurry nighttime photos of our homes glowing in full neon glory. And you know what happened? Nothing. People yawned, checked their phones. One guy openly played Candy Crush. By the time Karen dramatically slammed her clipboard down and declared, I cannot work under these conditions. A few people even clapped. Polite. Soft. But clapped. I wish I could tell you she rallied. I wish I could say Karen found some inner strength and mounted a comeback. But no, this isn't a Disney movie. A few days later, a U-Haul appeared in front of Karen's house. She packed up her life, and presumably several hundred unused violation notices, and left without fanfare. One final screech of tires down the street, one final glint of rage from behind her oversized sunglasses, and just like that, she was gone. The clipboard queen had abdicated. The morning after Karen left, the neighborhood felt different. The air was crisper. The birds chirped louder, like they knew something wonderful had happened. The squirrels even looked smug. People wandered out onto their glowing porches with steaming mugs of coffee and the casual swagger of a liberated people. It was official, we were free. Without Karen, the HOA tried to limp along, but it was like watching a chicken run around after losing its head. Meetings were missed. Emails went unanswered. The mandatory property inspections were quietly canceled. The clipboard mafia had crumbled. And honestly, no one missed it. Neighbors who had barely made eye contact before now chatted openly across their glowing lawns. Kids biked through the streets without fear of getting ticketed for excessive outdoor laughter. Someone even organized an unofficial block party, a crime that, under Karen's regime, would have warranted a 30-day lawn flamingo probation. At the party, Mr. Henderson raised a solo cup in my direction and grinned. "To the man who started it all," he said, his voice rough but proud. I laughed and tipped my cup back. It felt good. Not just because we had outsmarted a dictator armed with laminated rules, but because the community had finally remembered how to be, well, a community. The irony was almost poetic. Karen had spent years trying to enforce neighborly values with threats and fines, but it wasn't until she was gone that the real spirit of the neighborhood woke up and glowed. Literally. Of course, there were still little reminders of the battle we'd fought. At night, the neighborhood shimmered like a giant neon art installation. Passing drivers slowed down just to gawk at the surreal beauty of it all. It wasn't just houses anymore, either. Some folks had gotten creative. Fluorescent mailboxes, glow-in-the-dark garden gnomes, solar-powered flamingos that pulsed gently with the rhythm of the night. One house even projected a holographic message across their front lawn. Live, love, light. Was it a little over the top? Maybe. Did we care? Absolutely not. And as for me, I made a few updates, too. My house still gleamed proudly, of course. But now, next to the front door, I installed a little plaque. Simple, tasteful. Backlit at night for maximum irony. It read, "In loving memory of the HOA, 2017, the glorious rebellion." Mr. Henderson chuckled every time he passed it. Sometimes new people moved into the neighborhood, wide-eyed and clutching their moving boxes. They'd see the glowing houses, the neon gnomes, the pink, blue, and green driveways, and they'd ask, "What exactly happened here?" And the old-timers would smile that slow, knowing smile and say, "Well, it all started with a box and a clipboard, and one stubborn guy who decided he wasn't going to repaint his house the way Karen wanted." Do I miss her? Sometimes. Not in a fond memories kind of way. More like how you miss the drama of a bad TV show when it gets canceled. There's a Karen-shaped hole in the fabric of our town, sure. But honestly, it's better this way. No more laminated threats. No more clipboards of doom. Just neighbors. Laughing, talking, living. And a street that, at night, looks like the gods of chaos themselves gave us a 5-star Yelp review. Thank you for being with us. Please share in the comments where you are watching from and whether you liked everything, and see you next time.